Okay.
All right, we're in.
Do we have a new tape, or are we going to?
New tape.
No, what, and now, as far as your experiences that you can recall with respect to Hoover Dam.
Tall, wet, big.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
Stress.
Good. Both Roger Miller and Darrell Davies are part of what I'm calling the second wave. People who came to Valley within the first 3 or 4 years after the college had started. So we'll start with Roger. Would like to know something of your background, training, experience, and what brought you to Valley.
Okay, I started at KVCC December 28th of 1973. And that was on the heels of doing an internship at the Valley as part of my master's degree program at Western Michigan University. And how I structured that internship was through Dr. Bruce Coker, who was in a class that I was taking, of which it was part of his doctoral program. The class was part of my master's program. So that introduced me to the community college. And I did my internship here, and the opportunity to employ myself full-time developed from that.
And Darrell, what about your background, experience, etc., and what brought you to KVCC?
I was attending Western Michigan University at the time, 1970, and in my master's program, medically related stuff. And I got tired of going to school and started looking for work. And one of the several places I came to fill out application stuff was KVCC. And they didn't have anything open at the time, but I happened to run into a fella named Dave Stiles, who at that time had just been appointed the chairperson of the biology department. And as a result of his job reclassification, he had less time for classroom stuff. So he told me politely, well, nice to meet you, but there's no openings. And then he said, by the way, how much anatomy have you had? And it just so happened that the fellowship I was doing at Western at the time, I was teaching anatomy labs. And when he found that out, he was surprised and excited. And he said, how would you like to teach all of our anatomy labs this fall? That was the fall of 1971. I said, well, I don't want to quit my master's program just to, teach part-time labs. He says, no, we'll configure them around your master's work, and you can do both. And so I thought, well, that sounded pretty good. So I taught anatomy laboratories starting the fall of '71 for that full year, and at the end of which they authorized a full-time faculty position. They posted it, and I applied for it, and was on board as a full-time term faculty member the following fall.
Yeah, great.
I think I would just add, I think that there was a lot of that right place, right time going on in those early years. Certainly once the doors opened, the college was established, then it was trying to keep up with the growth. And if you happened on the doorstep, again, right time, right place, there was a lot of opportunity, as I think was in Darrell's case as well as mine.
Sure.
So you come into a relatively new college, 2-3 years old. Programs are becoming established. Really no traditions yet. I don't know, Roger, what kind of expectations did you have coming in, and what kind of adjustments did you have to make? Having interned here, maybe not a lot, but what were your frustrations, your rewards, the good things?
Well, I guess I didn't really have any lofty or major expectations, and again, I had some sense or feel for KVCC through my internship experience. Of course, I had completed a master's degree program in student personnel services from Western, and I was interested in administration, and I wanted to use my formal training in some aspect of student services at the community college. And so anything that I could involve myself in to do that, of course I was excited and interested, and that's what I had the opportunity to do. I think our biggest challenge that I learned right out of the the first day that I was on the job at KVCC, we registered some 1,200 plus students, and that goes back in the day when it was a very manual process. And so I learned from that point that we had to do something to handle the volume. I mean, we had the services in place, we had the policies in place, but we needed to keep up with the growth, the rapid growth that we were experiencing those early years. So I guess that was the big challenge, and of course having resources, having human resources, having equipment, et cetera, to meet those challenges sometimes wasn't there. And so I guess maybe that was a sense of frustration. But as you learn after you've been in administration, that's an ongoing frustration because you never have the latest and greatest. So again, it's one of those things, working smarter as opposed to harder. But one of the milestones that, from an administrative standpoint, from my perspective, was when we purchased the IBM Systems 3 Model 115, which allowed us to go to online systems. And we were fortunate in student services to be the first unit to implement those online systems. And so we got away from the old punch card batch processing and went to a more interactive online system, and that was better than sliced bread. I mean, that just allowed us to again be more efficient and be more productive, and again really to get a handle on dealing with the growth that we were going through.
We're in the process of not only looking at the history but kind of celebrating KVCC. And Darrell, looking back, what kind of lights up the night sky of your memory as far as good memories?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess anybody who starts a new job is always excited and everything is wonderful, but you asked Roger and used the word, what were your frustrations? Well, early on there were no frustrations that I can remember, but there was one epiphany, if you will, and I must tell the story because I think it's very eye-opening. It was for me. At the time I became a full-time faculty member, the college was run by a college governance system that included something called a faculty senate or college congress, which had faculty members elected to this body that would then meet and convene and make decisions and so on. And I was very, very excited about getting involved in this process of democracy in the higher education, and going to have my input and influence and amongst these professional peers. And I had this wonderful pie-in-the-sky ivory tower view of this whole process. So I went to my first college congress meeting with pencil and paper and tape recorder, and I was getting ready to record wisdom coming out of the mouths. And I don't know if you remember this, but you happened to be president of the faculty senate at that time. And you convened the meeting, and again, standing up in front of all these faculty members, of which I was brand new and just ready to go, and just hanging on every word you were going to say, and you opened your mouth and said, I've been at KVCC for, I think it was 6 years at that time, and you had been president of the College Congress for a number of years, and here I am waiting for the wisdom. Here it comes, And you said, as I look back on my 6 years and all of the hard-fought fights and all of the things people argued about and so on and so forth, not much of it mattered. And I almost thought I was in the wrong place. But the point being, with experience and looking back, you are able to sift through some of the trivia. And I've taken that with me for these 30 years, and it's been great advice. But high points, that certainly was one of them. It sounded almost like a negative, but that was a good one, put things in proper perspective. The thing that really appealed to me early on here when I first came was the family-like atmosphere of the people who were here. Colleagues within my own department, outside the department, and so on. It was really a family kind of thing. We had offices where people were mixed with different disciplines, and we interacted, multidisciplinary kind of interaction, and all the offices were together. We were much smaller then, and so you saw almost everybody every day. And we would have faculty seminar day activities that were off campus, and some even were overnight and so on. But it was a family atmosphere early on, and that was very appealing to me. And a number of us interacted socially as well. The growth of the college early on, and the reputation that the college established very early on with Dale B. Lake's leadership was, again, very enjoyable. That is, you'd talk to people in the community, they'd find out that you were an employee of KVCC, and they'd compliment you and the college and so on. So it was a very nice feeling of family, so to speak, in your professional life, as well as a good feeling of pride with regards to the credibility that the college had early established in the community.
And I just hitchhike on that, and I think those exist today. I mean, you're proud to be an employee of KVCC, and you look at the accomplishments and the past and the current and what we have in front of us. I mean, it's a pride thing to be involved with KVCC, and the positive interactions you have with people in the community with respect to KVCC. Another thing I'd like to add to the sense of family, the pride, but also something that I think is somewhat unique, but something that I've really appreciated over the years, especially from the administrative side, is that the sensitivity to what our customers need, and then our ability to get to that end, to that needed end or desired end, the ability to get there, and I think in a rather expeditious manner. And as compared to other colleagues that talk about how time-consuming and how long the journey can be to get to that desired end. I think that's something that KVCC has a good handle on.
Great. How long have you two known each other?
1969, maybe?
Go back before Valley.
Yes.
I took anatomy and physiology class at Western, of which Darrell was one of the lab instructors in the biology department at Western. And I knew from that experience that I wasn't interested in going into the instructional aspect of higher education, because I remember walking into the lab office, and these so-called lab instructors, of which we were supposed to hold on a kind of a platform, were playing floor hockey.
It was in
preparation for the next lab class.
We're trying to break some bones.
Plus, a roommate of mine was into tennis, and of course Darrell's involvement in that sport brought them together. So that was another way of which Darrell and I got together early on. But then lost touch, and then when, of course, Darrell was employed here before I was, and then when I hired on at Valley, and all of a sudden I realized that Darrell's here, and we kind of rekindled that early on friendship.
And my awareness of your friendship and what have you really didn't register until we got involved with the bike trips. And both of you were recruited in leadership kind of positions to help with the bike trips. I'd like you to talk about those and the beginnings of them, and some of the good things and maybe some of the not so good things that came out of all of that. Reflect on the bike trips.
Well, can I just jump in there? I just want you to, Paul, you mentioned the good things and the bad things, and there were a lot of both. But when that's all put together, and you look at the bike trips and what they were, I think even the bad things were positive things in the end. And I just think that that whole biking program was just a very positive experience.
Yeah, and that program, as you so call it, I'm not sure that you and Phil Wilson ever sat down in the mid 70s or early 70s and said we're going to develop a long-term program of bike trips, but your background in association with Taylor University, of course, and Wandering Wheels gave you the expertise to at least get the ball rolling here, or the wheel turning. And 1974, of course, was our very first bike trip, which we left from the college, went to Beaver Island, and returned to the college on bicycles, with the exception of that little boat trip. And I don't know about you, even though we were recruited, or I was recruited as one of the leaders on that trip. You didn't go on the Beaver Island. As a leader, the word leader, you tend to think, well, all the leaders know everything about what's going on, but as a leader on the very first bike trip I'd ever taken, and the very first bike trip you probably ever organized at that level, I was oblivious to what was going on, except for point A to point B and the days and the times. So I went into it, even though I was a quote leader, quite naive about what was in front of me, and certainly all of the riders went in with that as well. I think we didn't have any, as I recall, experienced hardcore riders in 1974. But it was an absolutely marvelous experience in so many ways. And just the two highlights that stand out in my mind just off the top is the whitefish we had when we had our dinner there on Beaver Island. Fresh whitefish out of, I don't know if it was Lake Superior or not, but it was one of the lakes, obviously. And also the Beulah Hill story, where the people in the community said nobody that they had ever recalled had ever made it up the Beulah Hill, I think what they just called it, on bicycles. And that next morning we all headed out, and I think everybody made it up the Beulah Hill. So it was one of those reputational things. But for 1974, then it did develop into a program, as you know, which we could say culminated this past summer with a coast-to-coast trip, which was not a repeat of the '76 trip, but you could go on for days talking about those bike trips. But what would you want to add something specific about them?
Well, I think those are the bookends of the bike trip program. It was the Beaver Island trip that initiated that concept, culminated with this past year's second journey across the United States, and of course then sandwiched in between, we had the trip to the Navajo Indian Reservation. We had the trip out east, which I believe started in Boston and ended in Williamsburg, Virginia. We had numerous trips to Florida, which were run during the spring break, and traditionally those trips had larger numbers because of the spring trip and the shorter length of time, so people were more available. Of course, and those got up to 70. I think we had one that was over 100 and some bikers, compared or contrasted with the first cross-country trip, which I think we had 28 riders. And then certainly one of the highlights of my biking experiences in the program was when we did the mountain trip, which I think we started in Mexican Hat, Utah, and rode to Estes Park, Colorado, and stayed up in the high country. And there were a number of experiences there. The recluse spider bite, the assumed watering stations between Mexican Hat and Cameron, I think it was. No, Cayenta, Arizona, of which there weren't any. And I think that's even as well planned as any of the trips could be. What made them special, and each one was special regardless of how many you've been on, is dealing with the uncertain. And even if everything was planned and mapped and we thought it was certain for the beginning of the day, something would come up that would be a change, would be adversity, and you had to cope, you had to adjust. And I think that's something that everyone that has participated in a bike trip comes away with, is knowing that you can really deal with whatever you encounter or you're confronted with. And maybe at the time, you didn't deal with it the best way, but you really realized you somehow would work through that.
If you survived, you dealt with it
Yeah,
the best way.
that's right.
Well, a little aside to the bike trips as a main theme, you may recall that, well, I became the tennis coach out here in 1974. And I think in 1977, I believe, I had discussed with you and Phil, about why don't I take my tennis team and have them go on the bike trips, and we'd ride the bikes part of the day and then play our matches in the afternoon on our spring trip. And we all thought, okay, that's fine. And for, I think it was 3 years running, I took the men's tennis team, accompanied the bike trip down to Naples, I think it was, and we would ride the morning part, and then at noon we'd take a van and head off to a tennis match, and then convene, meet you guys for the evening stop. And so the bike trips, expanded to a fitness, if you will, thing for the tennis team. And again, lots of great feedback and great times. And I don't think we had anybody get hurt those 3 years. They were in such great shape, pedaling about 30 miles in the morning or whatever it was, and then playing in the afternoon. So the bike trips have been a big part of our lives anyway, and yours as well.
Speaking about getting hurt and adversity, on the 76 coast-to-coast trip, Darrell had a shoulder problem, and it seems to me there was something about a B and an I. Mr. Miller, you guys want to tell us about those experiences?
Well, I'll tell you about the shoulder one first. When you do bike groups or bike trips in groups, of course, the group leader as such rides in the back, and we know that, but for some of the folks that may not know that. And the bike leader, therefore, is kind of susceptible to getting knocked off his or her bike because they're constantly looking backwards to clear traffic for the riders in the group ahead. And I was doing just that sort of thing around Cincinnati. I think we were actually on the expressways very early in the morning. There weren't much traffic, but going across those entrance and exit ramps can be kind of scary nonetheless. And I was looking back to clear traffic, and the rider in front of me, Jean Herbranson, swerved to her left and caught my front tire, and that's the classic how you get nailed on a bike, and both wheels went right out from underneath me, and I fell and cracked my hockey helmet. You may remember at those times we were wearing helmets made for hockey, ice hockey, and dislocated my shoulder pretty badly, and couldn't ride anymore that day. And the next day, I think I ended up in Parkersburg, West Virginia, at the hospital there or something. And but eventually got back on the bike. But that was a good testament to having some kind of headgear, because I think without that, falling on that cement, I may not be here today to do this interview, and Roger could do it all.
Well, I, being leaner, more physically fit, with cat-like reflexes, never really had that kind of an experience. But I did have a physical challenge in a way, and we were cresting whatever elevation outside of Durango, Colorado, and that left us with, I think, a couple of miles of downhill, and I forget now how many thousands of feet we were going to drop into Durango, but it was considerable, and it was towards the end of the day, and so the idea was to get there as quickly and with as least amount of effort, and so it was lay down on the bike and let it go, and you obviously pick up a considerable amount of speed, and at that speed you don't do a lot of moving around on your bike seat. Well, I'm partially down this elevation drop, and something nails me right between the eyes, right? just in the bridge of the nose area, and it really hurt. But obviously, I was more concerned about keeping my bike upright and getting to the bottom of the elevation. And so when we got down, I had realized that because I had been hit by a bee, and I didn't really think anything of it. It was stuck in the bridge piece of my sunglasses. Well, the next morning when I awoke, I had some kind of impaired vision, and I realized that my left eye was swollen shut and my other eye was puffy. And of course, then I realized that I'd been stung by a bee. I knew I had, I thought it was a slight allergic reaction to bee stings, but obviously I learned from this experience that I have a more considerable allergic reaction to bee stings. But anyway, long story short, by the second day, both eyes were swollen shut. So, and of course, the goal of the cross-country bike trip, the goal that kept you getting up in the morning, getting on that seat, and your tush, keister, whatever you want to call it, was always a little tender. I don't care how many miles you had beyond you, but what kept you going every morning to get up and get going was I want to make all the miles. Well, I was pretty concerned with my eyes swollen shut, and I would, of course, put cold compresses on them to try to reduce the swelling so I could at least have some little peek holes. But I did have to go to a doctor's office. I forget now the community, but it was a very rural community. And one of the riders in my group stayed back with me. Everybody went on. Of course, again, the idea was to get in, get something to take care of the swelling, and then get back on our bikes and catch up so we wouldn't miss any of the miles. Well, the rural doc in the Levi's and a flannel shirt, he thought it was pretty neat, as everybody else did, that we encountered on this cross-country bike trip as far as what we were doing. He gave me an antihistamine injection and said, well, you better stay in the waiting room here for 20-30 minutes just to make sure you don't have any reaction. And of course, I'm thinking, okay, the injection will take care of my swelling. 20 minutes, because we're already behind. I started equating that into miles, and so we kind of sped up the clock, and thanks Doc and Terry Florian and I jumped on our bikes, and I think by lunch we caught up with the rest of the group, and for the next day I was in pretty good shape again. But again, it's one of those things where every day was new experiences. You never knew what was going to come your way, but again, you just push back, relax, and deal with things as they came to your attention.
Just a little bee.
Just a little bee.
All right. Okay, we're at a point in time where we need to be thinking about wrapping this up. Anything else come to mind by way of a fond memory? An exciting event? Big surprise, whatever, over the years, either bike trip or otherwise?
Well, I would just, with respect to the bike trips, I feel very fortunate that I was on staff at KVCC at a time when this was just getting started, so I had an opportunity to get involved in the bike trips because I had not traveled very much. I was a physical fitness maniac, so it was, you just fed to my interest to see the country, of which I hadn't seen, and then secondly to challenge me physically, of which I've worked real hard to prepare myself to be successful to make all the miles in these bike trips. But great experiences. Saw the country, got to know a lot of people that were on the trips and that we came in contact along the way. And I'm here today talking with Darrell, and those bike trips certainly cemented or certainly heightened our friendship, and we have lots and lots of memories that we'll always have that we can share with one another. And I guess I would just
not on tape though,
inject one of those right now, in that in preparation for the cross-country bike trip, I've always been a runner. Darrell, not so much, and so we're going to run on a regular basis. And I'll never forget, Darrell tends to be a little bit asthmatic, and with that makes some irregular sounds, unique sounds. And I will never forget the first day that we ran, and we were going to run a couple of miles, and Darrell says, I think the longest I've ever run at any one given time was 101 yards. Darrell's a former collegiate football player going back to his Butler days. And that just sticks in my mind. And when we got done that day, or actually I got done and waited for Darrell, it was true. I'm sure he was right at 101 yards. But great opportunities, and that's both sides. I mean, we're talking about the bike trips now, but that holds true for working at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. I'm finishing up my 28th year. Great people, great place. We do great things. It's a wonderful community, and the opportunities that are made available, the bike trips are one of them, but there's many, many others that just makes Kalamazoo Valley Community College a unique place to work and for students to attend college.
I'm going to have to change seats.